Dr. Christie Kwon. I'm a board member with the Foundation for Vertebral Subluxation, and I have the pleasure of interviewing our foundation president, Dr. Christopher Kent, today. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Kent.
Well, thank you, Dr. Kwon. It's always a pleasure to spend some time with you and to share with people about the work we're doing.
Always. We're so glad to have you at the foundation. And I know you recently presented at our Immunity Conference. Can you speak a little bit more on your research and investigation on the topic of immunity and chiropractic?
Sure. We began by looking historically at the role that chiropractors have played in situations involving infectious disease, going back to the 1918 pandemic, when there were case reports and multiple case series suggesting that people under chiropractic care fared far better than those under traditional medical care. And although the randomized controlled trial wasn't around in those days, and we didn't really have good experimental designs involving cohort studies, we were able to, look at some of this old data and see that there really is nothing new there. In fact, historian Simon Senzon reported that some chiropractors from that era said that that's what saved their practice, was the ability to help people. So the next step was to take a look at what contemporary evidence is out there. And we reviewed a special series of papers that was published on the neuroimmune connection and looking at the mucosa and its innervation and the bilateral communication between the nervous system and the immune system, looking at the role of the gut microbiome, looking at kind of the totality of the system. And what I found very interesting was that the authors talked about how in the past, immunologists were in their silo and neuroscientists were in theirs, and rarely did they interact. And now with the emergence of neuroimmunology, psychoneuroimmunology, neuroendocrinology, and so forth, we're seeing that the totality of the regulatory system of the body is very dependent upon the integrity of the nervous system. So the third part of my presentation was a little bit different in that I changed hats and did my attorney thing and reviewed some of the laws and regulatory dynamics that are operative here. Things such as the PrEP Act, the Model Health Emergencies Acts that have been enacted by various states, and the tremendous power that they have invested in governors and so forth, and the general lack of accountability and lack of anything other than the mantra, follow the science, when there's really very little science to follow, regardless of what your position on it is. So I only had an hour, and we tried to tie those three concepts together: the historical basis and the history that chiropractic's always had when there have been public health emergencies and challenges. Secondly, the role of the nervous system in providing immunity, and we kind of emphasized the respiratory system, the mucosa, and the digestive system, and then the regulatory and legal issues surrounding immunity and public health.
That's incredible. And you have such a unique understanding of how legislation plays a role in what we can and cannot do and how we live our lives, in largely shaped by your training as an attorney as well as a chiropractor, which is quite amazing. And we as a profession have so much gratitude for you for that understanding. How do you feel that the research that we're doing might be able to help influence future policy or legislation? Do you see an avenue for some change there to help people just kind of understand better how the body works in terms of all these axes, psychoneuroimmunology to begin with, as well as the understanding of chiropractic? And do you see an avenue in the future for a better understanding shaping policy?
Sure. And it's a very complex process. Uh, if we look at politics, I remember when I was working with a lobbyist and we were going to meet some legislators, he said, "You know what a legislator's job is?" He said, "Actually, any politician's job." I said, "What?" And he said, "To get reelected. That's all you need to know. Present everything in that context in the back of your mind, and that will be a wonderful thing." So to some extent, public demand drives public policy. So if there's a demand for chiropractic services, as there was when chiropractic was being considered for inclusion in Medicare, the VA, and other programs, and though the implementation of that was imperfect, the thing that drove it was public demand. The other thing that legislators find persuasive, of course, is research data. They want to know that there's more going on here than a philosophical argument, that we do have data to demonstrate not only efficacy and effectiveness, but cost effectiveness as well. Because, of course, people want to make sure they're getting good value for their healthcare dollars. You know, the United States spends about twice the amount of money on so-called healthcare as the next developed nation on the list, yet we're 30-something in overall healthcare performance according to WHO. So policy demands that we provide value, and we need to gather that data as well as the scientific data.
And in terms of the research we're doing, you mentioned, the simpler times before the illustrious RCT was demanded in research. And I remember enjoying your presentation. And what all do you think we can glean from the research and investigation done by chiropractors in those simpler times? And how can we transport that into 2021 research language?
I think the answer is inherent in the question. That's what we need to do. We need to look at these old designs, which were basically a compilation of, here are the number of cases under chiropractic care, here are the number of cases under medical care, here are the number recovered, here are the number that succumbed, here, and all of those kinds of things. But again, we didn't really have any objective measures. Some things obviously don't lend themselves well to randomized controlled trials, such as intentional infection of a cohort to see what happens, especially if there's no treatment available. So there are ethical dynamics here too. But what I think we need to maintain sight of is that it's absolutely unacceptable to impose a more burdensome standard on chiropractic than conventional medicine. When I look at what passes for science in this whole COVID-19 world, I will stick my neck out and say that I think the quality of evidence that we have is just about as robust as theirs. And much of it is based on speculation, wishful thinking, extrapolation from what appears to be biologically plausible mechanisms in the basic sciences, and observed clinical outcomes in real people in terms of perceived quality of life. And that we need to make sure that we're on a level playing field as closely as possible, and that we have the data to support our position.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you definitely have my vote if you were looking to get reelected. And we really do appreciate your input and wisdom always. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Christy. It's always a pleasure to spend time with you.
Have a great day. Thanks.